Let's take our seats. We are about to start. Maybe before we even start, I just want to make a positive disclosure. For those of you with good zoom lenses and those with keen eyes, all the minute features that you see on my face have got nothing to do with Parliament's makeup artists. It's something else that we can talk about offline after the session itself. Today, we are going to be dealing with the rules, the workshop on the rules, which the Secretary requested that we should have. You'll recall that we had a similar encounter last year that helped us in terms of ensuring that we have a better understanding of your requirements, but also that we're able to provide you with critical information that you are able to interpret what happens around the organization of the State of the Nation address. Now, I call this the workshop on the rules, and not necessarily a press briefing as you normally are accustomed to, because you'll recall that the presiding officers always host the traditional State of the Nation address briefing on the eve of the big event itself, which is, as it is now, scheduled to take place on the 9th of February. That's when the presiding officers, having finalized and received all the necessary confirmations, will be able to confirm critical information that I know means a lot to you about the logistical arrangements and plans pertaining to the State of the Nation address, issues like the RSVP, the format of the event, everything that is going to be happening on that day. That is still coming. This is part of our ongoing engagement to deepen our interaction and engagement around issues of mutual concern. And the Secretary requested that we convene it, that he comes to talk to us specifically about the rules. You'll recall that there have been some important developments throughout the course of last year in this area, and it's a very important area when it comes to the governance of joint sittings. So that is the purpose in a nutshell of the encounter that we're having today. With that broad introduction and context, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce the principals and also just give you a sense of how the program is structured. I'll do that as we switch off our cell phones or putting them on silent. We've got the Secretary to Parliament. His name is Mr. Gengezi Mgidlana, who's going to be the first up in giving us a broad context and outline to us how the engagement, the workshop, will be structured. With the Secretary to Parliament are the two Deputy Secretaries to Parliament. Ms. Baby Kyawa is on the Secretary's right-hand side, and she is the Deputy Secretary for Support Services at Parliament. And on the far left, on the left-hand side of the Secretary is Advocate Modibe Dipindela, who is the acting Secretary, Deputy Secretary to Parliament, responsible for core business. We also have got the Secretary to the National Assembly. I'm not sure if you need an introduction in that regard, but he's Mr. Masbule Kaso, dressed in a suit today, no black gowns and white bow ties. But he still represents that area as much and is great with the same enthusiasm that he always does in the chamber. We also have got senior parliamentary officials here around us who are part of this gathering. We will have, as usual, the discussions, the presentations, the reflections, and we'll also afford you the opportunity to ask questions at an appropriate time. So as you follow the articulations, the presentations by the principals, please do take notes so that when we get to the time when you are afforded the opportunity to ask questions for clarification, you are ready and able to do so. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for making it to this press conference. Again, just a reminder, I hope our cell phones are off at this stage, or at least are on silent. I will invite the Secretary to Parliament to address us. Over to you, Mr. Mgidlana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jacobs. Good afternoon, members of the media, colleagues. We are quite pleased to host this particular workshop today, which basically deals with the rules related to Sona in particular. You would note and recall, of course, that Parliament has been working on strengthening its rules, revising them and updating them in line with the recent developments within the country. And secondly, it has been doing so as part of a process of improving its own operations. Noting that Parliament has been in existence now for just over 21 years, and therefore there's been that need to reflect on the rules over time and basically see what is it that we can do to improve and make sure that the rules are in line with the context of the new South Africa. They're in line with the developments within the region, and they also help us to address some of the challenges that are occurring globally, and help us to maximize certain opportunities that we see and find in order to improve the business of Parliament. Of course, Sona is generally viewed as a very important event in the calendar of South Africans. It's not just an event that, is uppermost in the minds of South Africans. It's very important as part and parcel of the legislative program, precisely because it affords the President of the Republic to basically put in place his program, the program of his government for the year to the members of Parliament, the elected representatives, who then also would have that opportunity then to engage the government of the day on the basis of the plans that they've put forward in that particular financial year. And therefore, it becomes very important to all South Africans from all sectors, from all walks of life, to take a very keen interest on what government plans to do and aims to do for the year in question. This, of course, is a very important event, that is the opening of Parliament, the Sona, as a flagship in the political calendar of the nation also, because it affords us then that opportunity to do serious reflection on where we are and where we want to go. And of course, at the top and the head of this particular event is the Speaker of the National Assembly and the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, who act jointly to then provide leadership to this particular gathering. The gathering is, of course, convened by the President, who then will take through members of the House, both houses sitting together, to take them through the pace of things that will happen in this particular financial year. Now, I won't go into details around the specific rules that are applicable, because I have here the two capable secretaries of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, who will take through members of the media the relevant provisions of the rules that are applicable. But safe to say that Sona is both an important event, both constitutionally and in terms of our own legislative program. Today, really what we want to emphasize and rehash is what the Speaker reiterated when we had the first occasion in this particular year to talk about Sona, indicating on the preparations that we have made today, to say Parliament is ready once again to host Sona as convened by the President in this regard. All the arrangements have been made, which will be in due course, will be in a position to relay to you. The event, of course, is uppermost in the hierarchy of events that are happening within South Africa, which basically means that it has been accorded the rightful status as one of the highest events in the country. You would recall that in this event we have our head of state and government present. We have the judiciary present there. We have the executive present, and we have, of course, the legislative arm represented, which would constitute the entirety of the South African state. Of course, you have people who would then come and witness that, various sectors of society. You know, business would be there. You have various religious formations and other sectors of civil society that form part and parcel of that in order to witness the particular event. So it's a very important event. And of course, as is normally the case, we also make sure that we invite members of the public, who also, some members of the public will then have that opportunity on this particular day to take part in this event. The event, of course, triggers a number of interests from a wide variety of people, rightfully so, because it's an event where South Africans have to hear what the government has to deliver in this regard. So it's an important occasion. It's an occasion that is also important not only in South Africa. As you would know, South Africa plays a very important role regionally. It plays a very important role within the continent. And indeed, it has participated extensively in the global arena, shaping a wide variety of issues. So it's an important issue, not only for South Africans, but it's important for people within the region to basically listen to what South Africa has in mind in this regard. You would recall that the sitting itself is a joint sitting, and therefore has specific rules that are applicable thereto, and those rules, the colleagues, as I have indicated, will take you through those rules, the rules that are related to Sona. And Sona, being a special event and a special occasion in that regard, has those rules that say what are the things that can happen and should not happen, as enunciated in the process that parties, all parties who are represented in Parliament have gone through and have agreed to, in terms of how they want to conduct themselves in this regard. So we'll highlight bits of what is new, which is what colleagues will then indicate to yourself, and how those rules differ from the ones that we have had, so that at the end of the day, you can also then be in a position to indicate and interpret actions as they are taking place, and what are the implications of those particular actions in the House, and how we should relate to them, and the structures that have been set up to deal with that, if there are any. Now, around issues of safety and security, of course, as the highest event in the calendar of the country, it would have the highest honors that can be given to any such type of an event. You have, of course, as I've indicated, just to reiterate, members of the public, senior leadership of government, civil society, business and diplomatic corps. So the kind of security that will be provided will be consistent with, you know, the level of the people that are there, and the hierarchy within the state. So basically, we are expecting, you know, the same kind of security that has been deployed by those colleagues who are assisting us in this regard. You would know that this is primarily the function that is provided to by colleagues who are working in the security cluster in this regard. SAPs have a role to play. The military have a role to play, as they normally do. And then you have all the other elements of the state who perform their respective roles in this regard. And they've given us an assurance that they've done all the necessary plans that they needed to do for an event of this nature, given the information that they have. Now, of course, around the logistical arrangements, which are very intricate, the various parties that have been invited, we have indicated to them much more clearly on what is expected from all those that will be invited. Basically, it's an event for the President and the members of Parliament, and there we have indicated what arrangements we have made for the President and members of the government, of Parliament, including the executive that will be there to listen to the President. We have advised members of the Diplomatic Corps on what we have been able to do in this particular instance for their preparation. This we have done as part of improving the service in terms of making sure that all the stakeholders that come to Parliament basically are well briefed, and secondly, they know what to expect and what to do. We also are engaging with various sectors of society and business included there, in order to make sure that the arrangements are going on properly in this regard. Now, I know that this is not going to be the only press briefing that we do. We're going to have quite a number of press briefings, which will give you a little bit more detail in terms of the plans that have been made in this regard. And this one, really, as I understand, it's basically a situation of us providing information first and foremost to members of the media, so that at least we're at one in terms of how we see things, how the plans have been organized, and secondly, so that you can also then, we can assist members of the public and the media in the interpretation of the rules that have been adopted, and to basically make sure that everyone is able to follow the proceedings of the House, and they are able then to interpret the issues accordingly. I would like to stop there. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Secretary, for that overview and context. Secretary says it's for improved service provisioning. It's for mutual empowerment. An effective engagement and constructive relationship between Parliament and the media is in the interest of the public, would depend on both of us for understanding what their institution is doing and be able to understand those things as they should in the context of the application. So, Secretary did indicate that we're going to have a presentation on the rules, the new rules that govern the joint sitting. You know that there have been new rules. You were part of that process for the longest time in 2015 when it was under consideration. We're going to have a presentation on that. But if there are any particular pressing questions at this stage with regard to what the Secretary has given, I'll take those questions. Alternatively, we can take note of the issues and take questions after the presentation by the House Secretaries on the rules. Can I get an indication? Wyndham, I see your hand. I'll acknowledge it. And Janet. And Mary Ann Merton. All right, so we'll take a round of questions, maybe just one round of questions on what the Secretary has said, just so that things are not lost and fall through the cracks, but it's not going to be elaborate before we take the second presentation. Thank you very much. You want to start, Wyndham?
Wyndham Hartley from Business Day. Mr. Secretary, how many new members have been recruited to the Parliamentary Protection Services, and have they all resigned their previous jobs, and have they been trained?
Okay, Janet?
Sorry, Mr. Secretary. Could you also just, I'm not sure if you're going to get into this, I'm sure you will, but I'm a little bit confused about the new rules. So if you could just make sure that you put that into perspective in terms of 53A, which was for the National Assembly. Is this just a repeat of that for now, the joint rules? And just to make sure that we're in the picture of exactly the process, because I understood that the joint rules book was still to go through Parliament the final process. So a little bit confused about exactly what's happening there. Thanks.
Janet Head is from Media 24. I think you omitted to identify yourself, your title. That's right. But I suppose your question also relates to the upcoming presentation, discussion on the rules itself, on the substance of the rules, right? Okay, Mary Ann Merton for this particular round.
Hi, Marianne Merton, Daily Maverick. Coming back to the security matters raised by Wyndham Hartley. Have you had briefings with Nat Joints, who are presumably, like last year, coordinating the security aspects? Have the intelligence services, in particular the Minister of Intelligence or anyone delegated by him, assured you that we won't have a boo-boo like we had last year? Have all the security agents been trained appropriately? Will you allow, or will the Speaker allow, jamming devices into the National Assembly? Has any of that featured? And have the security forces, including the intelligence services, assured you that from their side there'll be no more debacles? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Those were the three hands I had seen. Yeah, we'll afford the Secretary a chance to respond.
Thank you very much. I think the ones that are related to the rules, I'll leave it to the two secretaries to perhaps say something about that. On the question of whether we have done any specific or special recruitment for Sona, the simple answer is no. We still have the same complements of staff that we had. And of course, we continuously train our staff like any other institution in this regard. So there is no recruitment that we have done specifically for Sona. And then the second one that relates to whether we have had any assurances from the relevant ministers. I think assurances were given, if you would recall, by the appropriate ministry on what occurred at that time. They gave a clear explanation from their side on what happened and gave an assurance that such an activity, such a particular instance will not occur again. So we are confident, I think, on our side, and we are planning for a successful event. We are planning for an event that is free of any, eventualities that may have been caused either by us or those that we work with in this regard. So the simple answer is our plans are in place in that regard, and we are not expecting basically any mishaps. So generally around security, we have done our plans, and as I've said, the issues around security are related to the nature of the event that we have, which is a high-level event. We have the head of state, we have the chief justice, and all the judge presidents. You have the executive, and you have captains of industry and various leaders of civil society who are here invited. So that means really it's the highest event in the country, and you have members of parliament who will be there. So we have taken the appropriate security measures, and those measures do not include really hiring any new staff at this stage. And even if we wanted to, we can afford to do that as a country. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Shall we then proceed to the next discussion topic, which is specifically the rules by the two House Secretaries, the Acting Secretary, Core Business, Advocate Pindela. Do you want to start?
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs, and thank you, Secretary to Parliament. Thank you, colleagues. I hope that my voice is not going to fail me. If I do clear my voice from time to time, please pardon me. We have three sets of rules in Parliament. We have the rules of the National Assembly, which govern the proceedings of the National Assembly and the National Assembly alone. We also have the rules of the National Council of Provinces, which deal with the proceedings or govern the proceedings of the National Council of Provinces and National Council of Provinces alone. In other words, the rules of the National Assembly are not applicable to the proceedings of the National Council of Provinces, and conversely, the rules of the National Assembly are not applicable to the proceedings of National Council of Provinces. We also have the joint rules. The joint rules are a set of rules that govern joint business of the institution, the joint business of Parliament, the joint sittings, as well as the proceedings of joint committees. I'm advised that this rule book has been distributed, and this is a rule book that contains the joint rules. The joint rules, as I have indicated, govern the proceedings of the joint sittings, and those are the rules that are applicable to the State of the Nation address, because the State of the Nation, the President addresses the two houses sitting jointly, and therefore the joint rules are applicable there too. As the Secretary has indicated, the rules have been amended. The two houses have amended their own rules or are in the process of amending their own rules. The joint rules have also been amended. Other parts of the joint rules are also in the process of being amended. The process of amending the joint rules in particular is as follows. There is a joint subcommittee on joint rules. This subcommittee consists of members of the two houses. This subcommittee is a subcommittee of the joint rules committee. The joint rules committee is a committee of the two houses, and it is chaired by the Speaker of the National Assembly and the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. The Subcommittee on Joint Rules is a multi-party subcommittee which reports directly to the Joint Rules Committee. The Joint Rules Committee is also a multi-party committee that consists of members of the two houses, and as I have indicated, is chaired by the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces as well as the Speaker of the National Assembly. The question that has been put to the Secretary was whether the joint rules have been amended and the procedure that has been followed in amending the joint rules, and I have outlined that process. So the Subcommittee on Joint Rules dealt with the joint rules which were referred to it, then reported to the Joint Rules Committee. The Joint Rules Committee then reported to the two houses, and the two houses accordingly adopted the joint rules as put before them or as proposed to them by the Joint Rules Committee. So that is the procedure to be followed in adopting the joint rules. The joint rules, and perhaps the rule that, or the joint rule that you'd be interested in, would be the rule that deals with the disruptions. I do not want to put more emphasis on that rule because it is not the only rule that deals with the proceedings of the joint sitting. If one looks at the rule book on the joint rules, you have Chapter 2 and Chapter 2 capital A, which deals with the order in the joint sitting as well as the rules of debate in the joint sitting. So those are the rules which are relevant to the State of the Nation address. The rules dealing with disruptions have been incorporated into the joint rules as a result of the amendments of the joint rules. So as I have indicated, I do not want to put more emphasis on those rules merely because there are other rules that also govern the proceedings of the State of the Nation address. As you all know, the State of the Nation address is delivered by the President. It is followed by the debate in a joint sitting. 2 days have been set aside for the debate, and a third day is set aside for the reply by the president. So that is the process that would be followed insofar as the State of the Nation address is concerned. I do not know if there's any specific questions that you would want me to address. I would also request my colleague, Mr. Klaso, to add if there's anything that he would want to add to what I have said. Thank you.
Thank you, colleague, and good afternoon. Just to add that this joint sitting for the 11th of February is called in terms of Section 84(2)(d) of the Constitution. Now, that section empowers the President to convene Parliament for special business. And in this instance, that business is the State of the Nation address. So the sitting of the 11th of February is called specifically and exclusively for the President to deliver the State of the Nation address. That is in terms of the Constitution and the rules. As my colleague has indicated, there are rules that deal with various issues that arise during proceedings, and that even indicate who speaks when. But maybe we should allow you to ask questions and you respond to the specific questions that will arise. Thanks.
Thank you. I see the hands were up even before you finished your invitation, Mr. Klaso. Thank you, Advocate Pindela, and thank you, Mr. Klaso. Now we'll take questions on the rules. Shall we start? Annika, you'll be first. Gay, second. Marianne, third. Do we have additional 2 hands? Wyndham, final hand. Okay, we've got 4 hands for the first round on rules. Annika, you want to start? Please identify yourself and the media house that you're representing.
Thank you very much. Annika Larson from ENCA. Just a follow-up question from Marianne's, please, Mr. Secretary. Perhaps I wasn't listening hard enough, but I didn't hear your response to the jamming devices, whether there were going to be any jamming devices that you know of put there by intelligence SAPs or the military. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Gay Davis, Eyewitness News. Just on a point of clarity, can you just give us the date when the joint sitting of the House adopted the new joint rules, or the rules as amended? Thanks.
Hi, Marianne Merton again. It's a follow-up from Gay's question. We do know that the National Assembly adopted Rule 53 last year already. We are still not sure whether the NCOP has adopted its equivalent for its rules. Possibly we missed it. Could you please give us the date in which the NCOP amended its own rules? And my recollection is that the joint rules as amended were not actually dealt with, at least not by the National Assembly, before the year ended at the end of November. If I am mistaken, which is perfectly possible, would you please be able to give us the date on which the National Assembly adopted the joint rules amendment? Could you similarly give us the date on which the NCOP actually adopted these new joint rules? And perhaps if you could assist, if one of the 2 houses has not yet adopted these new joint rules, what is the legal and technical position governing the Sona joint sitting? Thank you.
Thank you. Wyndham?
Wyndham Hartley again. You say there will be arrangements for procedure during the sitting of the 2 houses for the Sona. Will points of order and or points of privilege be tolerated?
Okay, thank you. That is the first round of questions. We'll request the Secretary and the Acting Deputy Secretary Core Business and Secretary to the NA to respond to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the question that was asked on the devices and so forth, we had indicated from our side that first and foremost, that there were statements issued, if you recall, last year by ourselves indicating that we had not requested for use of such devices. Secondly, there were subsequent statements that were made by the ministry itself explaining what happened and indicating and giving an assurance that such particular activities would not occur. So in the planning that we have now, really, on our side, we still maintain the same kind of posture, which basically is we're not requesting, have not requested any use of such devices, and we are not really expecting anybody to be using those, you know, yeah.
Mr. Secretary, just a follow-up then, were you quite firm with intelligence and the minister in saying, you know, this cannot happen again, or was it all quite cordial and pleasant?
Well, I think the key issue is that more than being firm or cordial or something, we have to do things within the law, right? And in this instance, what we're expecting from all agencies is to act and within the ambit of the law, as it were. And that assurance is there, and it is the expectation that from our side as Parliament that things will occur within the law. And I think we are quite satisfied with that.
Awesome.
All right. On the question about when the rules were adopted, the rules were adopted on the 26th of November, 2015, and we're happy to provide you with the minutes of the House when the rules were adopted. There were declarations of vote, as I can recall, certainly the NA, just before the rules were adopted, and parties expressed their views on the rules. And the rules that were adopted were not just about this matter that we're dealing with today. They also related to the establishment of a oversight mechanism on Parliament, and a rule that related to the Defence Committee. It was contained in the same report. Now, in terms of issues of points of order, points of order should relate to points of procedure. And that is the only point of order that is sanctioned by the rules when it relates to points of procedure. And the same with points of privilege. We have got the Powers, Privileges and Immunities of Parliament Act, which states what matters of privilege are. And a point of privilege has to relate to the provisions of that act. Anything outside of this would not constitute either a point of privilege or a point of order. The joint rules also, Joint Rule 13, deal with how members could speak in a meeting of this nature, in a joint sitting, that they may only speak when invited to do so by a presiding officer or with a prior permission of the Speaker and the Chairperson of the NCOP. I think that addresses the two questions that were raised on the matter. Thanks.
The other question was whether the National Council of Provinces adopted a rule similar to Rule 53 of the National Assembly. The National Council of Provinces has not adopted a rule similar to Rule 53 of the National Assembly, precisely because, in the view of the National Council of Provinces, its rules are sufficient to deal with any eventuality that may arise in the House. My colleague has dealt with the point of order, whether the point of order would be allowed during the State of the Nation address. I think some of these questions should really be settled because we also dealt with them previously. I think the point of contention in the previous State of the Nation address was whether a point of order would be allowed during the State of the Nation address. And we consistently stated that a point of order relates to a point of procedure, as my colleague has indicated, and that the State of the Nation address is called particularly for the President to address the House, and that points of order and points of privilege may be raised during the debate on the State of the Nation address if parties do have any points of order to raise or any points of privilege to raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Pindela. Any further questions? Okay, Marianne, Lucanio Calata, Gay Davis. I can't see right at the back. Denise Williams. Any final hand? Can we agree then that is going to be the final round? Marianne, we start with you and follow the order as I called out the names until Denise Williams. Thank you, Marianne.
Yes, sorry, just a very, very quick clarification. When did the NCOP adopt these new joint rules? I didn't quite get the date. I assume Advocate Xhasa spoke on behalf of the National Assembly when he mentioned 26th of November. Thank you.
This is really just to be clear. Just on the points of order and the points of procedure, okay during the debate, but not okay on the day that the President delivers the address. Okay. Tom.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Lucanio Calata. I work for the SABC. Last year, we also had rules in place at the State of the Nation address. Clearly, rules weren't followed, and what happened. Are you, as the administration, are you confident that you have in place this year rules that would be able to prevent similar incidences from occurring or reoccurring within the State of the Nation address? And just on the same issue, but what were the lessons learned from last year's State of the Nation address that you guys could potentially or have made arrangements for this year to put in place? What were some of the key lessons that you learned from the incidences of last year? Thank you.
Thank you. Denise?
Hi, Denise Williams from The Citizen. I just want to get an update on Zelda Holtzman, the head of security services for Parliament. My understanding is she was meant to have another hearing at, sort of get an outcome at the end of January. What is happening? Is she still going to be in play for the State of the Nation? I did see her last week, and she was working, but I'm not sure what the outcome of that is. Thanks.
The Secretary and the Deputies, with the Secretary to the NA, who will respond to the questions.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you. I think I'll just take the easier one and leave the most difficult ones for my colleagues. The one about lessons learned. I think one of the key lessons learned really is one that said we have got to build better relationships internally. there's nothing that really beats that one. That platforms and spaces have been created by the political leadership within the institution to deal with that, basically to engage with parties. And parties have been engaging amongst themselves. And that process really led to the product that we have now, which is the rules that have been amended, because it has basically fostered some consensus across the board amongst all parties to determine how they would want to conduct themselves and how they want us as the administration to support them in doing that. And I think they've outlined themselves, they outlined the issues very clearly in that regard, in terms of the rules that have been put forward and what kind of support they require from us as the administration. So, which I think were very good lessons, because the product that we have now, it's basically a product that to a very large degree mirrors the consensus of parties, and they've given us a clear direction in that regard. I think the rules one, the colleagues will answer, and I think I will ask, was that right? The one that relates to disciplinary matters, that the Deputy Secretary, will answer that one.
Advocate Pindela. Okay.
Address the Ms. Holzman is still on precautionary leave, and not to prejudice our institutional processes. There's nothing more I can say, but she's still on precautionary leave. Thanks.
And the disciplinary processes are continuing. Yes.
The question that has been put to us is whether the rules that we have are sufficient. In our view, yes, the rules that we have are sufficient to deal with any eventuality that may arise during the joint sitting. I still have to get the date on which the joint rules were adopted. I'll come back to you about the date on which the joint rules were adopted. Oh, okay. My colleague has got the date. He can mention the date.
The both houses adopted the rules on the 26th of November, 2015, separately.
Is there any question that has not been responded to? Okay, I think it's a new round of questions. Where do we start? Let's start with the new hands. Ma'am, sorry, I've just forgotten your name.
It's Erin Bates from News 24.
Okay, yes, we'll start with you. And then we follow the order. Yeah, Alestin, and then Gay, and then Janet. Thank you.
So my question regards what the Secretary said earlier about nothing have been changed overall regarding the approach to security and planning for Sona. And I find that interesting because we know from the past that members tend to stand up and get quite red in the face and make demands and then seem to not be heard and then get more and more irate. And I'm just wondering if you're confident with these very stringent rules which prohibit members from raising points of order or points of procedure during the President's address, whether you think things are in fact going to go smoothly or whether some of our red-faced members might go a bit blue from having to hold back their words. Thank you.
Alestin from Media 24. Mr. Secretary, I just wanted to know what is the status with your talks with the union, because there were threats made about withholding labor and disrupting Sona. I just want to know what's the status of that. Thanks. And if you're confident that there will be labor.
Did we all get the part about relating that to the disruption of Sona? Alex, can you just repeat that? How do you link that to the organization and preparations for the State of the Nation address?
No, amidst all the tensions last year, some of the threats that were made by the union was that they may withhold their labor during Sona. That will lead to disruptions, yeah.
Gay and then Janet.
Thanks. So I'm covered by my colleague, the question related to the state of play between the union and Parliament management. I mean, last year there were threats from Nahawe that there would be go slow, people wouldn't work. So thanks.
Janet Hurd, Media 24. If you could just be absolutely clear, because we have to report correctly on this, and I still feel that there's a little bit of grey area. Can you confirm that this is the book that we will be using for the joint rules, except for the one amendment, right? That's how I understand it, but that has been passed by both houses. But then there is a whole new rule book coming out that is still to be in place, where there's a whole lot of other rules that have been changed, but that hasn't gone through the houses yet. It still needs one more box to tick. So I just want to clarify that there are the two different things: the overall rules that are changing, and we're going to get a new book, and then just this is just one amendment in terms of disturbances. Thanks.
I'm sure the amendment you're talking about is the one that was ATC'd on the 20th of November. Am I right? Is that the date on your amendment? This one. Yeah. Is it dated 20th November? Okay, thank you very much. Advocate Pindela?
Yeah, I have earlier on referred to 3 sets of rules. The National Assembly is in the process of amending its own rules, which are applicable to it. The National Council of Provinces is also in the process of amending its own rules, which are applicable to it. And the joint rules, to the extent that they have been amended, the amendments have been incorporated or would be incorporated in the rule book of the joint rules. So the joint rules have been amended to that extent, to the extent that you have indicated, ma'am.
The issue about security in the house and procedure, I think those are 2 different questions, right? The matters as they occur in the house, we have indicated that those are governed by the rules of the house. They are not governed by any security measure whatsoever. Right? So they are governed by the rules of the House. So in that instance, we should refer to the joint rules on what the joint rules allow and do not allow. And the joint rules in this regard, they are consistent with our Constitution, and they are consistent with any acceptable rules of...
Thank you. My question was more around whether you're confident that the members of the National Assembly will abide by the rules, which seem to be gagging them in a way.
Well, we have honorable members really who themselves have debated these issues, they've agreed on these issues, and we have no reason on our side as administration to second guess them in that regard. So basically the rules are there for all members and parties to conduct themselves in the manner that they've so determined. So we are quite confident that the rules will be followed. And in the event that the rules are not followed, also the House does say basically what the role of the chair is in facilitating a meeting. The second issue around the union, as you would know, you have correctly indicated that the statements that you're referring to were made last year. And we have reported that subsequent to some of the statements being made, we reached an agreement around issues which all parties are working towards implementing that agreement. So to the best of my knowledge, those issues are matters in progress, matters that were in disagreement, they were agreed to. Parties are working on the implementation of that agreement. Really, I think there's nothing much to say around that. It wouldn't be good to speculate.
Thank you very much. Can I assume then that was the final round of questions? Colleagues, as was indicated by the Secretary from the beginning, we intend to be in constant interactions with you about a number of things. There are many logistical issues that you are interested in, some of which affect your own role performance in the build-up, during and after the State of the Nation address. Our intention is to make those processes even more effective in facilitating your work in your service of South African public. We'll be in touch with you. We have got the Acting Manager for Media Management Unit here, Mr. Kabedi Modise, whom I think I should introduce in terms of that formal role. He will be the contact person between ourselves and yourselves in terms of all the logistical issues that you need to know about. He has already started informing you about these processes through the website and various other alerts that he's been issuing, working together with the Acting Section Manager for the Parliamentary Communication Services, Ms. Letebele Jones, who's also seated here, with whom you are more familiar. Thank you very much. Can we take it that the workshop is now closed? And thanks once again for your attendance.